The story of Attila the Hun begins long before his name is spoken in terror, long before the walls of Rome tremble at the thought of his approach. It begins where the earth seems to stretch without end, on the vast Eurasian steppe, under a sky so wide that it can make a human being feel smaller than a grain of dust. Out there, the horizon is a blade. Grass bows in endless waves to the wind. Winters fall like iron, turning the land into a frozen sea of white and gray, where horse herds paw through crusted snow in search of buried stalks. Summers burn dry and bright, the air filled with dust and the smell of horses, leather, sweat, and smoke. This is a world shaped by motion, by hooves and wheels, by the ceaseless migration of people who call no city home and carry their lives in saddlebags and wagons. Before Attila, the Huns are already a rumor of dread. They come from somewhere beyond the dim edges of Roman geography, perhaps from lands beyond the Volga, drifting west in broken tribes, shards of some lost confederation shattered by other nomad storms. To settled peoples, they seem like a living force of nature. Dark riders appearing on the skyline, small in the distance and then suddenly everywhere, arrows whistling through the air like locusts, fires running along the thatched roofs of villages. They are horse people, born to the saddle, able to sleep slumped over their mounts, to eat while riding, to fight and disappear before their enemies can form proper lines. Their language is strange, their faces foreign, their braids and scarred cheeks a visible declaration that they belong to another world. Among these people, in a cluster of wagons on the great Hungarian plain, a child is born who will one day be known as the Scourge of God. In his infancy, he is not yet the terror of chronicles. He is a small bundle wrapped in furs, rocked by the movement of the wagon, lulled to sleep by creaking axles and the low murmur of his mother's voice. He opens his eyes to a sky that knows no roofs, only stars. Smoke from the campfires coils upward, merging with the wind. Dogs bark, horses snort and stamp, men talk in low tones about raids, alliances, and omens. Attila's earliest memories are not of walls and streets, but of campfires under the open firmament, of the smell of horses and fermented mare's milk, of the taste of wind-blown dust on his lips. The elders of his clan tell stories around the fire, stories of ancestors who crossed rivers as wide as seas, who bent kings to their will, who followed visions and dreams. Little Attila listens with dark, intent eyes. He absorbs more than the words. He absorbs the sense that destiny is not tied to fields or houses, but to courage, cunning, and the will to dominate. He learns that in his world, weakness invites disaster. To be soft is to be swallowed. The steppe does not forgive the timid. It rewards those who can read its moods, who can move with its storms, rather than be broken by them. From childhood, Attila is trained to live as a hunter and a warrior. He learns to ride almost as soon as he can walk. At first, he is tied to the saddle, small hands clinging to the rough mane of a pony, while an older boy leads the animal in circles around the camp. Soon, he rides alone, knees gripping the horse's flanks, body moving with the animal's rhythm. He is taught to fire arrows from horseback, to draw the powerful composite bow that is the heart of Hun warfare, the layered wood and horn bending into a crescent, the string biting the fingers, the arrow loosed with a sharp exhale. Under the watchful eyes of his elders, he learns how to judge distance in a blink, how to adjust his aim for speed and wind, how to turn a gallop into a fluid platform for killing. Alongside him grows another boy, his brother Bleda. They share the same wind, the same dust, the same harsh schooling. They wrestle in the grass, race their horses across the plain, argue, laugh, and sometimes fight with the sudden flare of temper that siblings know well. But beneath the surface, they are different. Bleda tends toward enjoyment of the present moment, a relish for feasting and hunting, for the pleasures that life under a harsh sky allows. Attila's mind is sharper, his gaze more calculating. Even as a youth, he listens carefully to the conversations of the elders, to the nuances of alliance and betrayal. He notices which chieftains are assertive and which are cautious, who speaks boldly to his uncle, who hesitates. There is an early gravity in him, a sense of watching from just behind his eyes, as if he is already measuring men and outcomes. The Huns are not a single unified kingdom. They are a shifting confederation of clans and subject peoples, held together by the charisma and brutality of their leading family. Attila grows up in the shadow of powerful uncles who negotiate with Roman envoys, who receive tribute in gold and silk, who test the resolve of both Eastern and Western empires. In his youth, Attila is sent as a sort of hostage or honored dependent into the orbit of Roman power. For a time, he is close enough to glimpse the world beyond the steppe, stone fortresses, straight roads, cities whose walls encircle people like a protective ring. He sees marble, glass, and painted frescoes, soldiers drilling in regular ranks. He also sees weakness, internal rivalries, courtly intrigues, the soft living that comes from centuries of security. To his steppe-hardened eyes, this world is both impressive and strangely vulnerable. These experiences seed in him a vision of power that is different from the simple raider's instinct. He begins to understand that there are empires whose wealth can be bent to the will of a man like him, that fear can be used as a lever to pry open coffers without always needing to burn cities to the ground. He learns the value of treaties, hostages, and tribute. He understands that a word, carefully chosen, can sometimes accomplish what 1,000 arrows cannot. When their uncle dies, Attila and Bleda ascend to joint rule. It is a dangerous experiment in shared authority, but for a time, it holds. They sit together in the great tent, whose posts are planted deep into the earth of the plain, whose interior is thick with carpets, weapons, and captured goods. Chieftains come to bow and swear loyalty. Envoys arrive from Constantinople and Ravenna, bringing gold, bargaining for peace, or at least the appearance of it. Attila often lets Bleda take the lead in the more ceremonial aspects of leadership, but behind the scenes, his mind is always at work. He is the one who presses hardest for higher tribute, for more favorable terms, for concessions that acknowledge the growing weight of Hun power. The steppe world under the brothers changes as their rule stabilizes. The Huns move beyond mere raiding. They become a war machine. They gather subject tribes, Goths and Alans and others, into a hierarchy of loyalty and fear. They organize their cavalry into units that can be thrown like waves against the borders of empires. They develop a rhythm of campaigning and wintering, of tribute and threat. The Hungarian plain becomes a kind of central camp, a staging ground from which forces can fan east or west as needed. Smoke from their countless fires smudges the horizon. Columns of riders crisscross the grasslands, delivering commands, mustering men, carrying news of opportunities and insults. In this period, Attila's talent for diplomacy stands out as sharply as his talent for violence. He negotiates with Constantinople, demanding payments in gold in exchange for peace along the Danube frontier. The Eastern emperors, anxious about threats on other fronts, agree to treaties that send wealth flowing into Hun hands. Each shipment of coin that crosses the river is both a symbol and a weapon. It enriches Attila's court, allows him to reward his warriors, strengthens his authority. It also feeds his contempt for those who pay, confirming his belief that Rome and Constantinople, for all their stone walls and monuments, can be bent by fear. He uses this fear with precision. When tribute is late or conditions are not met, Hun raiders cross the river. They move with terrifying speed, bypassing strong points to fall upon vulnerable towns. They burn fields, seize livestock, capture prisoners. They do not always hold territory, they do not need to. Their true objective is psychological. Survivors flee into the hinterlands or crowd into fortified cities, spreading stories of the riders whose arrows blot out the sun, whose horses can gallop for days, whose leader demands gold in exchange for restraint. Rumors exaggerate and magnify the terror, and Attila allows those rumors to do their work. Within the Hun Confederation, however, joint rule cannot last forever. Power shared is power contested. Bleda, for all his rank, does not see as far as his brother sees. He may be satisfied with the comfortable rhythm of tribute and occasional war, with feasts and hunts and the respect that already comes. Attila is driven by a deeper hunger. He wants unchallenged authority. He wants to pull every thread of Hun power into his own hand. The details of what happens are obscured by time, but at some point, Bleda dies, and it is no natural passing in old age. The suspicion that Attila had a direct role hangs over every version of the story. However it happens, from that moment the Huns have a single ruler. Attila stands alone. As sole king, his presence grows in intensity. Those who see him later describe not a giant, but a compact, powerful figure with a broad chest, a short neck, eyes that blaze when enraged and seem to look through a man when calm. He does not adorn himself with excessive jewelry or bright colors. He prefers simple, functional garments, letting others glitter in gold while he remains relatively austere. This is itself a sign. He does not need display to remind others of his authority. His authority is in the way he walks into a tent, in the hush that falls when he raises his hand, in the knowledge that his word can raise armies and destroy cities. Under his sole leadership, the Huns become the nightmare of Europe. Attila mobilizes his warriors with a scale and intensity that surpasses anything before. He trains them to ride and shoot as a single storm, to feign retreat and then wheel around in deadly ambush, to harry slow-moving infantry and encircle lumbering enemies. Horns sound across the plains, calling clans and subject peoples to gather. Wagons roll, laden with supplies and families. The entire confederation begins to move, an entire people turning toward conquest. He first drives his war machine against the Eastern Roman Empire. Campaigns crash down along the Danube. Cities that had stood for centuries feel the weight of the Hun onslaught. Fortresses are besieged by swarms of horsemen who circle like vultures, sending flights of arrows against walls, cutting off supplies, burning the countryside so that relief forces find only wasteland. Naissus, once a thriving Roman town, is torn apart, its streets filled with bodies, its buildings blackened shells. Refugees pour westward, bringing stories that sound almost apocalyptic. They speak of entire regions left empty, of rivers choked with corpses, of riders who appear in the dawn mist and vanish by twilight, leaving nothing but smoke. Constantinople itself, with its mighty walls, stands beyond their immediate reach, but its court is shaken. Emperors and ministers debate whether to resist or appease. They know that Attila understands the language of gold. They also know that every payment acknowledges his power and buys only time. Realms send envoys scrambling northward, bearing gifts, letters, and desperate bargaining positions. Attila receives them in his grand tent on the steppe, surrounded by furs, weapon racks, and the trophies of past campaigns. He listens to their polished phrases, their carefully chosen flattery, their veiled threats. His responses are measured, but beneath the formalities, the dynamic is clear. He is the one who can decide whether entire provinces burn or survive. Terror is part of his strategy, but he is not a mindless butcher. He understands that fear is most effective when it is controlled. Too much destruction can reduce the value of lands he might one day wish to milk for tribute. Too little allows enemies to grow bold. So he calibrates his violence. Some cities are left standing after their rulers pay and grovel. Others are made examples, their ruins serving as warnings more potent than any formal decree. As the Eastern Empire struggles to absorb these blows, Attila's gaze begins to shift. The Western Empire, with its internal divisions, its fragile borders, its declining tax base, presents itself as another field for Hun ambitions. In the West, a Roman general named Aetius has crafted a precarious balance of power, using alliances with various barbarian groups, including the Huns themselves, to keep the crumbling edifice of imperial authority from collapsing entirely. Aetius knows the Huns well. He has lived among them, learned their ways, used them as allies in his own struggles. That familiarity is both a strength and a vulnerability. When Attila turns his attention toward Gaul, the green and fertile lands that stretch from the Rhine to the Atlantic, the world feels as if a storm is changing direction. The decision does not come from impulse. It is the result of years of growing confidence. Tribute has flowed. Eastern cities have burned. Hostages have been taken and returned. Attila sends his messengers, demands handed down like commands from some dark thundercloud. Disputes over territories, over insults, over promised brides and broken agreements, all serve as pretexts. Rumors circulate of a call to unite the Huns and their vassals for a massive western campaign. The host that gathers is immense. Hunnic horsemen, but also Gothic warriors, Gepids, and many others ride under Attila's banner, drawn by fear, loyalty, or the hope of plunder. From the edges of forests and river valleys, from small settlements and wandering camps, men leave their homes and join the marching tide. They cross rivers at shallow fords, the water roiled by countless hooves, wagons creaking up the far bank. Where they pass, farms are abandoned, villagers flee into wooded hills, livestock driven hastily away or seized. News travels ahead of them like a chill wind. Churches fill with frightened people praying for protection. Local commanders scramble to assemble defenses, often too late. Attila drives into Gaul, and cities feel his approach like an oncoming earthquake. Some surrender quickly, opening their gates in the hope of mercy. Others resist and are hammered into submission. Along the way, the Huns leave behind burned fields, shattered walls, and columns of refugees trudging toward any place that remains untouched. The Roman world, already weakened, feels as though it stands on the edge of obliteration. But in Gaul, Attila's advance meets something he has not encountered in the same form before, a coalition strong enough to stand in his path. Aetius, understanding the threat, gathers an alliance that would have seemed impossible in earlier years. Roman troops, Visigothic warriors under their own king, and other federate forces come together, not out of love for Rome alone, but out of fear of what will happen if Attila is allowed to sweep unopposed across the continent. Old grudges are set aside in the face of this greater danger. The result is a force that rides to intercept the Huns on a broad plain in northeastern Gaul, an open expanse fit for cavalry, later remembered as the Catalaunian plains. The day that dawns over that battlefield is heavy with omens. The sky is vast, low clouds streaking across it. The grass ripples beneath the wind, already trampled in places by scouting parties. The combined armies of Rome and its allies form their lines, shields glinting, standards snapping in the gusts. On the other side, Attila's host seethes like a living storm, banners of different tribes fluttering, horses snorting, riders adjusting bowstrings and spear points. Between them lies a space that will soon be filled with dust, blood, and the cries of men. When the clash comes, it is immense. Arrows darken the air as Hun horse archers ride forward, loosing volleys and wheeling away. Roman and Gothic infantry brace themselves, shields up, feeling the thud of impact as arrows strike and splinter. The allied cavalry charges, lances couched, horses thundering, meeting the Hun riders in a wild, swirling maelstrom. The noise is overwhelming. The roar of men shouting battle cries, the screaming of wounded animals, the metallic crash of weapons, the dull, final sound of bodies hitting the ground. Attila rides at the center of his host, directing, signaling, sending units to exploit weaknesses, to feign retreat and draw enemies into traps. He is no distant general. Dust and sweat streak his face. His eyes burn as he tries to read the tide of battle. For hours, the outcome hangs in violent uncertainty. Ground is gained and lost. Units break and are reformed. In the press of bodies and flashing steel, the distinction between victory and annihilation is sometimes only the width of a blade. By the time the sun sinks, the field is a graveyard. Thousands lie dead or dying, friends and enemies alike, their blood soaking into the earth. Attila's army has not been destroyed, but it has been checked. He has not achieved the crushing breakthrough he sought. The coalition has held. Aetius and his allies stand battered but intact. To continue the struggle in the same place would be to risk catastrophic losses. Attila withdraws, gathering his surviving forces, pulling back from Gaul, his aura of invincibility cracked but not shattered. Europe exhales, shakily. The world has seen that the Hun can be resisted, but the price of resistance has been enormous. Attila is not finished. His ambition is not so easily extinguished. The following year, he turns his gaze toward the heart of the West, toward Italy itself, the land that Roman imagination has long considered the center of the world. He crosses the Alps, or swings along routes through the northeast, his host once more moving like a black tide. Northern Italian cities feel his presence like a shadow crossing the sun. Aquileia, a proud city near the head of the Adriatic, stands in his path. Its walls rise above marshes and waters, a symbol of Roman resilience. Attila lays siege. At first, the defenders hold. Days stretch into weeks. The Huns surround the city, cutting off supplies, sending arrows and stones against the walls. Attila watches, fueled by a cold patience. He understands the psychological dimension of such a siege. Inside, fear grows as food dwindles, as hope erodes. Eventually, the walls fall, whether by assault, betrayal, or sheer exhaustion. Aquileia is destroyed so thoroughly that later travelers struggle to find its ruins. Refugees flee south and west, carrying with them stories of a city erased from the map, of fiery ruin and slaughter. The terror spreads more quickly than the Hun march. Towns further along the Po Valley and beyond contemplate their fate. Some surrender without resistance, sending envoys with keys and pleas for mercy. Others fortify and pray. Rome, still a city of profound symbolic weight despite its diminished political importance, trembles at the thought that the Huns might someday ride through its gates. The air itself seems to carry the dread of an approaching storm, thick with the scent of fear, smoke, and the sweat of refugees crowding the roads. Yet even as Attila pushes into Italy, forces beyond battle lines begin to work against him. The land he has entered cannot feed him indefinitely. Northern Italy has already been ravaged by earlier wars, by internal conflict, by previous invasions. Fields lie fallow, irrigation systems broken, harvests meager. Attila's army is like a vast mouth that must be fed daily. Horses need grazing, men need meat and grain. As they move deeper, the burden on the land increases, and the land cannot sustain it. Famine begins to gnaw at the edges of his campaign. There is also plague, whether brought by the movement of armies or already simmering in the towns and countryside. Disease begins to spread. Men fall sick, their strength drained, fevers burning through units that once seemed unstoppable. Horses die, wagons stall. The air in the camps grows thick with the smell of illness and decay. These enemies cannot be threatened or negotiated with. They answer no envoys. They do not fear Attila's name. They simply do their quiet, relentless work. In this time of strain, an extraordinary meeting takes place. As Attila advances, a delegation arrives from Rome, led by its bishop, who will later be remembered as Leo the Great. He is not a general, not a man of armies, but a spiritual leader, robed not in armor, but in the vestments of his office. He comes accompanied by other high-ranking figures, bringing not swords, but words, not soldiers, but the weight of religious and moral authority. They approach the Hun camp, small against the vastness of the assembled host. What passes between Attila and the bishop is not recorded in exact phrases. There are no surviving transcripts, no echoes of their voices. There is only the stark fact that after this encounter, Attila does not march on Rome. Whether he is moved by Leo's presence, by the prospect of negotiated gains, by omens, or simply by a pragmatic calculation that the combination of famine, disease, and the potential resistance of the city make the venture too costly, he chooses to withdraw. For the Romans, the meeting becomes a legend of spiritual courage confronting brute power. For Attila, it is another decision weighed among many. He leads his armies back north, away from Italy, the dream of seizing the eternal city flickering and fading behind him like smoke. The retreat does not signal weakness alone. It also marks the limit of what a nomad empire, stretched across vast distances, can sustain in hostile territory. Attila returns to his base of power on the plains, still formidable, still feared. But something has changed. The great westward storm has crested. The edges of his might have frayed slightly. In the dusk of his career, he still holds immense authority. Yet the horizon of possible conquests has narrowed. Then, suddenly, the story takes an unexpected turn. Attila dies. It happens not on a battlefield, not at the climax of a great siege, but in the intimacy of a wedding chamber. He has taken a new wife, Ildiko, a woman of noble lineage among the Germanic peoples. In the night, after feasting and celebration, he retires to his tent. By morning, he is found dead. Blood has poured from his nose and mouth, staining the furs and the bed. His body lies still, the heart that terrified continents now silent. The exact cause of his death becomes an object of speculation and rumor almost immediately. Some say that he died of a sudden hemorrhage, a vessel in his body bursting from years of strain, drink, and the intense pressures of leadership. Others whisper of assassination, of a blade drawn by the new bride or by conspirators seeking to end his reign. The ambiguity adds to the aura of myth. A man who walked like a force of nature, who made emperors tremble, is gone in a single night, undone not by armies, but by something secret and unseen. His warriors mourn in their own fierce manner. Attila's funeral becomes another legend. According to later accounts, his body is placed in coffins of iron, silver, and gold, layered like his impact on the world. Raw power, wealth, and the enduring sheen of memory. These coffins are then buried in a riverbed. The waters are diverted temporarily to allow the grave to be dug. Once the burial is complete, the river is allowed to flow back into its course, hiding the tomb forever beneath its currents. The servants who carried out the work are said to be killed to keep the secret. Whether this exact ritual is historical or not, its symbolism is compelling. Attila, who moved like a storm over the land, is given to the moving waters, his grave as unmarked and shifting as the path of his campaigns. With his death, the cohesion of the Hunnic Empire begins to unravel with startling speed. Attila's sons and relatives argue over the inheritance of his power. Some seek to divide the territories and subject peoples. Others demand primacy. Old resentments and ambitions, suppressed under the weight of Attila's singular authority, rise to the surface. Subject tribes, who once submitted out of fear of the man, are less inclined to submit to his heirs. The aura that unified them is gone. Battles break out not just against external foes, but within the confederation itself. At the river Nadao, a coalition of subject peoples and former vassals turns against the Huns. The fight is fierce. Warriors who once rode side by side now clash as enemies. The Hun forces are defeated. Their dominance, which seemed so absolute only a short time before, fractures. Groups disperse, retreating eastward back into the vastness of the steppe or merging into the populations they once ruled. The empire of the Huns, held together by the will and charisma of one man, dissolves into history's shadows. Yet the impact of Attila's life does not dissolve so quickly. The shockwaves of his campaigns have shaken Europe's foundations, populations have been displaced, refugees forced to seek new homes farther west or south, territories have been devastated, economies disrupted, political balances upset. In the wake of his invasions, other powers move into the vacuum. Germanic kingdoms grow in strength. The Western Roman Empire, already fragile, continues its downward slide. Its capacity to respond to crises eroded by decades of pressure, of which Attila's assaults are among the most intense. In the centuries that follow, Attila becomes a figure of legend as much as history. Christian chroniclers portray him as a rod of divine wrath, a punishment allowed to fall upon sinful peoples. To them, his sudden death and the rapid collapse of his empire seem to confirm that no human power, no matter how terrifying, can stand long against the designs of heaven. Among the descendants of the peoples he once ruled or threatened, stories circulate that mix fear and fascination. He is remembered as a man of iron will and unrelenting cruelty, but also of stark simplicity, a ruler who embodied the wild freedom and relentless drive of the steppe. In the lands that now correspond to Hungary and its surroundings, later generations sometimes look back to the Huns as distant ancestors, weaving Attila into their national mythologies. Whether the bloodlines truly connect in any straightforward way is less important than the symbolic power of the association. Attila becomes a figure onto whom different ages project their anxieties and desires. The barbarian who challenges decadent empires, the dark mirror of civilization's fragility, the embodiment of a world in which speed, mobility, and ruthlessness can topple ancient structures almost overnight. On a deeper level, his story marks a turning point in the relationship between the steppe and the settled worlds of Europe. Long before and long after Attila, nomadic empires and confederations rise and fall along this frontier. Yet his impact on the late Roman world is so intense that it crystallizes the fear of the steppe in European imagination. When later writers and leaders think of threats from the east and north, they often think in echoes of Attila. His name becomes shorthand for devastation, his image a kind of warning etched into the continent's memory. The landscapes he rode across still exist. The Hungarian plain still stretches under the same wide sky. Rivers still wind through forests and fields. On quiet days, one can stand there and imagine the thunder of hooves, the dust clouds rising, the glitter of spear points under the sun. The cities that feared him have changed or vanished. The empires that paid him tribute have long since fallen. Stone walls have crumbled, palaces turned to dust. Yet the idea of Attila endures, a symbol of how swiftly the world can be upended when a man of immense will harnesses the forces of his time. He was shaped by the steppe, by a world where survival depended on speed, ferocity, and the ability to read the subtle changes in wind and grass. He turned those skills upon the great states of late antiquity, using terror as a weapon and diplomacy as an extension of war. He forged alliances and shattered them, accepted gold and demanded more, burned cities and spared others, always calculating how best to strengthen his position. His leadership held together a multi-ethnic empire that spanned wide territories without the permanent cities or bureaucracies that the Romans considered necessary for rule. His downfall came not from a simple military defeat, but from the fact that such an empire, so tightly bound to one man, could not easily survive his absence. Attila's life is an epic of contrast, between the endless sky of the steppe and the towering columns of Roman basilicas, between the smoke of nomad campfires and the incense curling in imperial palaces, between the improvisational freedom of a people who follow the herds and the rigid lines of legions on stone roads. He stands astride these worlds as both destroyer and mirror. In him, the Romans saw the reflection of their own fears and vulnerabilities, the fragility of their borders, the thinness of their veneer of control. To tell his story is to trace the arc of a comet through the late ancient sky. It appears suddenly from the dark, bright, and terrible, trailing fire. It crosses familiar constellations, distorting the known patterns, drawing the eyes of all who live beneath it. Then it passes, vanishing back into the blackness from which it came. The night sky looks as it did before, yet the memory of that burning streak remains, retold in stories, written in chronicles, whispered in legends. In the end, Attila the Hun is not only a figure from textbooks or dusty manuscripts. He is a reminder that history is not a straight road, that the centers of power can be shaken by forces that once seemed peripheral, that a child born in a wagon on a windswept plain can grow into a man whose decisions alter the destinies of empires. He is a testament to the enduring tension between the settled and the nomad, between stone and grass, between those who build and those who ride. Somewhere, in the imagination of centuries, his horse still gallops across the horizon, mainstreaming, hooves pounding, dust rising behind. The wind of the steppe still carries an echo of his name. And Europe, reshaped by the migrations and collapses that followed in the wake of his conquests, still bears, in the pattern of its peoples and borders, the faint but permanent imprint of the man who once made the known world tremble.